The moment Audrey Collins stepped into Bella Luna, she regretted agreeing to this blind date. The upscale Italian restaurant with its crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths was far beyond what she'd expected from a dating app match who'd suggested going Dutch on their first meeting. Smoothing her navy blue dress, the only semi-formal piece in her wardrobe, she scanned the busy Thursday night crowd for someone matching the vague description her roommate's cousin had provided. Dark hair, blue eyes, will be wearing a grey suit. Her gaze landed on a man sitting alone at a corner table, absently checking his watch while nursing what appeared to be a glass of scotch. Dark hair? Check. Grey suit? Check. Handsome enough to make her pulse quicken slightly? Definite check. Taking a deep breath, Audrey approached his table, her practical heels clicking against the marble floor. "Tyler?" she asked tentatively. The man looked up, his piercing blue eyes meeting hers with a flicker of confusion that quickly morphed into something else. Interest, perhaps. "I'm not," he began, but Audrey, already embarrassed by the fancy venue and feeling increasingly out of place, cut him off. "I know I'm a few minutes late. Traffic was terrible coming from downtown." She slid into the chair opposite him before he could protest further. "I have to say, your choice of restaurant is a bit much for a first date, don't you think? Especially since you were so insistent about splitting the bill." The stranger's eyebrow arched, and the corner of his mouth twitched with amusement. "Was I? You specifically said, and I quote, 'I believe in equality, so let's go Dutch on our first date.' Which is fine, really, but then maybe pick somewhere that doesn't charge $30 for pasta." Audrey unfolded her napkin, placing it on her lap with determined calmness, despite her growing unease about the man's reaction. Instead of appearing offended, he seemed entertained. "That's quite a specific recollection." "I have an excellent memory," she replied, then hesitated. Something wasn't right. The man before her was too polished, too confident. His suit wasn't just grey, it was impeccably tailored charcoal grey that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His watch alone screamed money. "You're not Tyler, are you?" A slow smile spread across his face. "No, I'm Jackson Montgomery." The name hit Audrey like a bucket of ice water. Jackson Montgomery, as in Montgomery Industries, the tech empire that dominated the West Coast. As in the 34-year-old billionaire whose face occasionally graced business magazines. As in the man who owned the very building where she worked as a mid-level marketing coordinator. "Oh my God," Audrey's face burned with mortification. She scrambled to stand. "I am so sorry, Mr. Montgomery. I've made a terrible mistake. Please, sit down." His voice was firm but not unkind. When she hesitated, he added, "You've already provided me with the most interesting conversation I've had all day. I'd hate to see it end so abruptly." Against her better judgment, Audrey sank back into her seat. "I should be looking for my actual date." Jackson Montgomery glanced around the restaurant. "Is he here yet?" "I don't know. I've never met him. Blind date, remember?" "Ah, yes. The economically conscious Tyler." There was that amused smile again. "Perhaps he's running late." As if on cue, Audrey's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced down at the screen and frowned. "Something wrong?" Jackson asked. "My date just cancelled. Apparently he got caught up at work." She made air quotes with her fingers, unable to hide her annoyance. "At 8:30 p.m. "Sure. His loss?" Jackson signaled to the waiter. "Would you join me for dinner instead? No Dutch treat necessary." Audrey stared at him, trying to process what was happening. "Are you serious? You want to have dinner with a random woman who just mistook you for her cheap blind date?" "I find you refreshing, Audrey. You didn't know who I was, and you were ready to lecture me about appropriate first date etiquette." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you know how rare it is for someone to speak to me without an agenda?" She should have said no. Should have apologized again, left the restaurant and called her roommate Jessica to laugh about the mortifying encounter. Instead, she heard herself say, "All right, but I'm not accepting a free meal from a stranger, even if he is a billionaire. We're splitting the bill." The surprise on Jackson Montgomery's face was worth any residual embarrassment. "Fair enough," he said after a moment. "Though I should warn you, I already ordered the chef's tasting menu with wine pairings." "Of course you did," Audrey sighed, mentally calculating how many months she'd need to survive on ramen to pay for half of such an extravagance. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of exceptional food, fine wine, and surprisingly easy conversation. Jackson was nothing like the cold, calculating businessman portrayed in the media. He was thoughtful, asked genuine questions about her work in marketing, and listened attentively to her answers. By the time dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate souffle with raspberry coulis. Audrey had almost forgotten about the circumstances that had brought them together. "So how does someone like you end up on a blind date set up by your roommate's cousin?" Jackson asked, savoring a spoonful of souffle. "Someone like me. Smart, beautiful, unafraid to speak her mind." Audrey laughed, the wine making her bolder than usual. "Those qualities aren't exactly winning me any second dates in this city. Men say they want honesty until they actually get it." "And what about you? How does a billionaire CEO end up dining alone on a Thursday night?" A shadow crossed Jackson's face. "Business dinner. The client cancelled last minute. Their loss," she echoed his earlier words, earning a genuine smile in return. When the check came, Jackson reached for it, but Audrey was faster. Her eyes widened at the total. "Oh wow, that's a lot of pasta." Before she could pull out her credit card, Jackson placed his hand gently on hers. "Please allow me. Consider it payment for saving me from another evening of spreadsheets and quarterly projections." Against her usual principles, Audrey relented. "Thank you." Outside the restaurant, an awkward moment hung between them as Jackson's driver pulled up in a sleek black car. "Can we drop you somewhere?" he offered. "No, thank you. I'll grab a rideshare." Audrey shifted her weight from one foot to the other. This was unexpected. Indeed it was. Jackson pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back before handing it to her. "My personal number, in case you ever want to lecture me about date etiquette again." Audrey accepted the card, fighting the smile that threatened to break through her composed expression. "Goodbye, Mr. Montgomery?" "Jackson," he corrected, "and I hope it's not goodbye, Audrey." The following Monday morning, Audrey was buried in marketing copy revisions when her desk phone rang. "Marketing department, this is Audrey Collins." "Ms. Collins, this is Patricia from Executive. Mr. Donovan would like to see you immediately." Audrey's stomach dropped. Robert Donovan was the company's regional director, and not known for casual check-ins with mid-level employees. Her mind raced through everything she'd done recently, searching for a mistake serious enough to warrant such a summons. "I'll be right there," she managed to respond, her mouth suddenly dry. The executive floor was a different world from her cramped office space 5 floors below. Everything gleamed. The glass, the chrome, the polished wooden doors. Patricia, an elegant woman in her 50s, led Audrey to a conference room rather than Donovan's office. "Wait here," she instructed before disappearing. Audrey stood nervously, too tense to sit. Through the glass walls, she saw Patricia knock on Donovan's door and speak briefly to someone inside. Then, to her absolute horror, Jackson Montgomery emerged and began walking toward the conference room. The billionaire was even more imposing in his professional element. Charcoal suit replaced by navy. Casual dinner conversation replaced by whatever corporate judgment he was about to pass. Had he somehow discovered where she worked? Was this some bizarre power play? The door opened, and Jackson stepped in, closing it behind him. His expression was unreadable. "Hello, Audrey." "Mr. Montgomery." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I don't understand what's happening." He studied her for a long moment before speaking again. "I didn't know you worked here when we met. Not until my assistant compiled the personnel files this morning for the department review." Department review? The floor seemed to tilt beneath Audrey's feet as realization dawned. "You're here to evaluate our department? To decide on the layoffs everyone's been whispering about?" Jackson's silence was confirmation enough, and suddenly their dinner, his business card, everything took on a sinister new meaning. "Was it all just a game to you?" she asked, her voice hardening despite her precarious position. "Slumming it with the commoners before you fire them." "That's not fair," Jackson replied, his voice low but firm. There was no trace of the warmth from their dinner conversation. "I had no idea who you were until this morning." "But now that you know," Audrey challenged, momentarily forgetting she was addressing not just her company's CEO, but the owner of half the commercial real estate in the city. Jackson ran a hand through his dark hair, a surprisingly human gesture that contrasted with his otherwise impeccable appearance. "Now I have a conflict of interest I didn't anticipate." Audrey crossed her arms defensively. "I don't need special treatment, Mr. Montgomery." "Jackson," he corrected automatically, then sighed. "I'm not here about layoffs, Audrey. Montgomery Industries is acquiring Pinnacle Marketing, your company, and integrating it into our corporate structure. I'm here to evaluate which departments need restructuring and which team leaders should remain in place." The relief that it wasn't about layoffs quickly gave way to fresh anxiety. "So instead of firing us individually, you're deciding which entire teams get dismantled. That's an oversimplification, is it?" Audrey knew she should stop talking, should nod respectfully and excuse herself. but something about Jackson Montgomery pushed her buttons in a way that overrode her usual professional caution. Because from where I stand, you're still playing God with people's livelihoods. A flash of something, respect, irritation, crossed Jackson's face. Your team's performance metrics for the past 3 quarters are impressive. Your digital campaign for the Westridge project increased client engagement by 34% with minimal budget increase. Your department isn't in danger. The fact that he had clearly studied her team's work before this meeting should have been reassuring. But it only heightened Audrey's unease. So what is this conversation about exactly? Jackson moved to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline for a moment before turning back to her. I wanted to explain the situation myself, given our previous encounter. How thoughtful, Audrey muttered, unable to keep the sarcasm from her voice. You're angry. I'm confused. 3 days ago you were just a man in a restaurant. Now you're my boss's boss's boss, and you're telling me my career is in your hands. That's the nature of business, Audrey. Things change quickly. Not this quickly, and not this personally. She took a deep breath, trying to rein in her emotions. I should get back to work. Actually, Jackson said, stopping her before she could reach the door, I'd like you to join the executive meetings this week. Your perspective on the marketing department's integration could be valuable. Audrey stared at him, suspicious. Is this because of dinner? This is because you clearly know your department's strengths and weaknesses better than the current director, who couldn't answer half my questions this morning. Jackson's tone was matter-of-fact, but his eyes held a challenge. Unless you're not interested in having input on your team's future, it was a trap, and Audrey knew it. Say no, and she abandoned her team to whatever restructuring the corporate overlords deemed appropriate. Say yes, and she'd be spending hours in close proximity to a man who made her feel both intrigued and infuriated. When's the first meeting? She asked finally. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. The ghost of a smile touched Jackson's lips. Dress code is business formal, but I suspect you already knew that. Is there anything else, Mr. Montgomery? Just one thing. He stepped closer, close enough that she could detect the subtle scent of his cologne. Our dinner remains between us. I don't mix business with pleasure, and I won't have the transition team questioning why you're in these meetings. Understood. Audrey's voice came out steadier than she felt. If that's all. Jackson nodded, and she escaped the stifling conference room, her mind spinning. By the time she reached her desk, 3 new emails had appeared in her inbox. Calendar invitations to executive meetings she had no business attending. Proof that the surreal conversation with Jackson Montgomery hadn't been a stress-induced hallucination. Everything okay? Asked Ben, her colleague from the adjacent cubicle. You look like you've seen a ghost. Just corporate politics, Audrey replied, forcing a smile. Nothing serious. But it was serious. By some cosmic joke, she had inadvertently entangled herself with the most powerful man in the building, a man who now held her career in his perfectly manicured hands. A man whose rare, genuine smile had made her heart skip a beat over soufflé and wine just days ago. The rest of the day passed in a blur of nervous preparation. Audrey stayed late, poring over performance reports and strategic plans, determined to walk into tomorrow's meeting as prepared as humanly possible. When she finally left the building at 9:30 p.m., the security guard gave her a surprised look. Working late, Ms. Collins. Big meeting tomorrow, Frank. She attempted a casual tone that fell decidedly flat. Must be important if it's got you burning the midnight oil. You're usually out of here by 6 sharp. Just doing my homework, she replied with a weak smile. At home, her roommate Jessica was curled up on the couch watching reality TV. She looked up when Audrey dropped her bag by the door. You look terrible, Jessica observed, pausing her show. What happened? Audrey collapsed onto the couch beside her. Remember that blind date your cousin set up? The one who stood you up. What a jerk. He didn't exactly stand me up, Audrey said slowly. I went to the restaurant, and I mistook someone else for him. Jessica's eyes widened with interest. Ooh, mystery man mix-up. Was he cute? Did you have dinner with him anyway? Yes and yes. Audrey hesitated, wrestling with Jackson's instruction to keep their dinner private. But this was Jessica, her closest friend and confidant. Turns out he's Jackson Montgomery. Jessica's jaw dropped. The Jackson Montgomery? Tech mogul Forbes cover rumored to have dated that supermodel Jackson Montgomery? The very same. Holy shit, Audrey! Jessica practically shrieked, grabbing her friend's arm. You had dinner with a billionaire? What was he like? Was he stuck up? Did he try to get you to sign an NDA before dessert? Despite her stress, Audrey laughed. He was surprisingly normal. Thoughtful, actually. asked questions about my work and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. And, Jessica pressed, clearly sensing there was more to the story. And today I found out he's acquiring my company. He's literally going to be my boss. Jessica's expression shifted from excitement to concern. Oh, that's complicated. Tell me about it. Audrey ran a hand through her hair. He wants me in executive meetings starting tomorrow. Says my perspective could be valuable. That's good though, right? You've been saying for months that upper management doesn't listen to the marketing team's input. Yes, but... Audrey trailed off, unsure how to articulate the jumble of emotions Jackson Montgomery stirred in her. It's weird, Jess. 3 days ago he was a stranger in a restaurant. Now he has the power to reshape my entire career. Jessica studied her friend carefully. You like him? What? No, I barely know him. But you're attracted to him. Audrey's silence was answer enough. Well, there's only one solution, Jessica declared, reaching for her phone. What are you doing? Texting my cousin to see if Tyler wants to reschedule. The best way to get over one man is to go out with another. I don't need to get over Jackson Montgomery, Audrey protested. I need to navigate a complex professional situation without losing my job or my mind. Sure, Jessica replied skeptically. But a little distraction wouldn't hurt. Audrey didn't have the energy to argue further. She retreated to her room to select an outfit for tomorrow's meeting, settling on her most professional black pantsuit and a silk blouse, an ensemble she reserved for client presentations and performance reviews. Sleep eluded her that night. She tossed and turned, her mind cycling through worst-case scenarios for the morning meeting. By the time her alarm blared at 6 a.m., Audrey had managed barely 4 hours of fitful rest. 3 cups of coffee later, she stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor, clutching her portfolio like a shield. The conference room was already half full with people she recognized as department heads and senior directors. They glanced at her with varying degrees of curiosity and confusion as she hesitated in the doorway. Ms. Collins. Robert Donovan appeared at her side, his perpetually harried expression even more pronounced than usual. Mr. Montgomery mentioned you'd be joining us. Please take a seat next to Patricia. Audrey nodded, making her way to the indicated chair while acutely aware of the whispers following in her wake. She had just settled in when Jackson entered, flanked by 2 men in suits whom she didn't recognize, likely part of his corporate team. Good morning, everyone, he addressed the room, his gaze sweeping over the assembled executives before briefly meeting Audrey's. Something unreadable flickered in his blue eyes before he continued. Let's begin with department assessments. Mr. Donovan, if you'll start with the current organizational structure. The meeting progressed with mind-numbing corporate speak until Jackson suddenly said, Ms. Collins, you've been quiet. What's your assessment of the digital marketing strategy's integration potential? All eyes turned to Audrey, and for a terrifying moment her mind went blank. Then she took a deep breath, opened her portfolio, and began to speak. Our current strategy has 3 key components that would align well with Montgomery Industries' existing framework, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. However, there are significant gaps in our cross-platform analytics that would need to be addressed for a seamless integration. As she spoke, she noticed something shift in the room. The initial skepticism on the executives' faces gradually gave way to attentive consideration. Even Jackson was watching her with what appeared to be genuine interest, nodding occasionally as she outlined her recommendations. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before Jackson said simply, Thank you, Ms. Collins. That was precisely the insight we needed. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of technical discussions and strategic planning. By the time it concluded 2 hours later, Audrey felt simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. She had held her own in a room full of executives, had contributed meaningfully to decisions that would affect her entire department. As everyone filed out, Jackson caught her eye and motioned for her to stay behind. When the room had emptied, he closed the door and turned to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. That was impressive work, Audrey. Thank you, she replied cautiously. You spoke with more clarity and insight than people who've been in leadership positions for years. She shifted uncomfortably under his praise. I care about my team. I can see that. Jackson moved closer, leaning against the conference table. Which is why I want to offer you a position as Director of Integrated Marketing once the acquisition is complete. Audrey froze, certain she had misheard. I'm sorry, what? The director role. I want you to consider it. But that would mean... She trailed off, the implications hitting her like a physical blow. That would mean replacing my current boss, Nancy Parker. Ms. Parker has already been offered an early retirement package, Jackson stated matter-of-factly. She's accepted. Audrey felt the blood drain from her face. You fired Nancy and decided to give me her job? Based on one meeting? And one dinner where I mistook you for someone else? Jackson's expression hardened slightly. I made the decision based on performance metrics, department evaluations, and what I observed today. The dinner has nothing to do with it. You expect me to believe that? Audrey shook her head, backing toward the door. This is too much. I need some time to think. Of course, Jackson replied smoothly. Take the weekend. We'll talk on Monday. Audrey nodded stiffly and escaped into the hallway, her mind reeling from an offer that should have been the highlight of her career, but instead felt tainted by circumstances she couldn't control, and by feelings for Jackson Montgomery she wasn't ready to examine too closely. The weekend gave Audrey no clarity. She oscillated between excitement about the potential promotion and unease about how it had materialized. By Monday morning, she'd settled on accepting the position, but establishing firm professional boundaries with Jackson Montgomery. That resolution lasted precisely until 9:17 a.m., when her desk phone rang. Ms. Collins, this is Patricia from Executive. Mr. Montgomery would like to see you at your earliest convenience. Audrey's stomach twisted. I'll be right up. This time, Patricia led her directly to Jackson's temporary office, a corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of downtown Seattle. Jackson stood as she entered, his tall frame silhouetted against the rain-streaked glass. Audrey, thank you for coming. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. Please sit. She perched on the edge of the seat, hands folded tightly in her lap. I've considered your offer. And I'd like to accept the position, but with some conditions. An amused smile played at the corner of his mouth. Conditions? That's bold. I need to know this is based solely on merit, she said firmly, and I need clear reporting structures that don't involve direct supervision from you. Jackson leaned back in his chair, studying her. You think I'd show you favoritism? I think the circumstances of our meeting are unusual enough to warrant clarification about professional expectations. Fair enough. Jackson nodded. You'd report to the VP of Marketing at our headquarters. I rarely involve myself in department-level operations once the organizational structure is established. Relief washed over Audrey. Then I accept. Excellent. Jackson pushed a folder across the desk. These are the formal details of the offer. Salary, benefits, responsibilities. Take time to review them thoroughly. Audrey opened the folder, and her eyes widened at the salary figure, nearly double her current compensation. This is generous. It's market rate for the position and your qualifications. Jackson's tone was businesslike, but when she looked up, his eyes held warmth that made her pulse quicken. The transition team will announce the new structure this afternoon. In the meantime, I'd like you to join me for lunch to discuss integration priorities. Warning bells rang in Audrey's mind. Lunch? At Moretti's. 1 o'clock. It's a business lunch, he added, as though reading her concerns. Patricia will be there, as will Thomas Hilton from HR. Oh, of course. Audrey felt simultaneously relieved and oddly disappointed. I'll see you at 1. Back at her desk, Audrey stared at her computer screen without seeing it. The promotion was everything she'd worked toward for the past 4 years. Recognition, responsibility, compensation that would finally put her student loans within striking distance. So why did it feel so complicated? Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Guess who wants to reschedule? Tyler's free tonight if you are. Audrey hesitated. Perhaps Jessica was right. Maybe what she needed was a distraction from the Jackson Montgomery situation. A normal date with a normal guy who wasn't her billionaire boss. Tell him I'm in, she texted back. Somewhere casual this time. At lunch, Jackson was the perfect professional, cordial, but not overly familiar, focused entirely on business matters. If Patricia or Thomas noticed any tension between them, neither commented on it. By the time they returned to the office, Audrey had almost convinced herself that their unusual first meeting was behind them. That feeling lasted until she stepped into the elevator to find Jackson alone, apparently heading back to the executive floor. Productive lunch, he said as the doors closed. Very, she agreed, keeping her eyes fixed on the illuminated floor numbers. You seemed distracted toward the end. Audrey shifted uncomfortably. Just processing all the changes. Jackson studied her profile. Is there something else, Audrey? The elevator stopped at her floor, the doors sliding open to reveal her salvation from this increasingly uncomfortable conversation. I have a date tonight, she blurted out, immediately regretting the words as soon as they left her mouth. Something flickered across Jackson's face, Surprise, perhaps, or something else she couldn't quite identify. I see. With Tyler, she continued, unable to stop herself. The original blind date from Thursday night. The economically conscious one. His voice was neutral, but his jaw had tightened almost imperceptibly. I hope it goes well. Thank you, Audrey said stiffly, stepping out of the elevator. She could feel Jackson's eyes on her back until the doors closed behind her. That evening, Audrey met Tyler at a casual brewpub downtown, a far cry from Bella Luna's white tablecloths. Tyler Williams was exactly as her roommate's cousin had described: dark hair, blue eyes, and a pleasant if somewhat forgettable face. He worked in software sales, lived with 2 roommates in Capitol Hill, and had perfectly reasonable opinions about everything from craft beer to climate change. He was, in short, exactly the kind of man Audrey should be interested in. So, Tyler said, finishing his second beer, Hannah mentioned you work in marketing. That sounds interesting. It is, Audrey replied automatically, realizing she'd been only half listening to the conversation. Though things are changing at work. We're being acquired by Montgomery Industries. Whoa, the big tech conglomerate? Tyler looked impressed. That's a major deal. Are you worried about layoffs? Actually, I'm being promoted. The word still felt strange to say aloud. Director of Integrated Marketing. That's amazing. Tyler's enthusiasm seemed genuine. We should celebrate. Another round? Sure, Audrey agreed, though the beer she was nursing was still half full. As Tyler waved for the server, Audrey caught a glimpse of a tall figure entering the brewpub. Her heart stuttered as her brain registered dark hair, broad shoulders, and an air of confidence that seemed to command the entire room. Jackson Montgomery. Here, of all places. He wasn't alone. A striking blonde woman in a designer dress hung on his arm, laughing at something he said. The woman was vaguely familiar, a model or actress perhaps, the kind who appeared in glossy magazines and red carpet events. Audrey, you okay? Tyler's voice broke through her shock. You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, she managed, dragging her gaze away from Jackson and his date. Just thought I recognized someone. But it was too late. Jackson had spotted her, his expression registering surprise before settling into something unreadable. After a brief word to the hostess, he guided his companion directly toward Audrey's table. Ms. Collins, he greeted her, his voice betraying nothing. What a coincidence. Mr. Montgomery, Audrey replied, her mouth dry. I didn't expect to see you here. Jackson turned to Tyler, extending his hand. Jackson Montgomery. Tyler Williams, Tyler responded, clearly confused but polite. Nice to meet you. This is Veronica Winters, Jackson introduced the blonde woman, who offered a dazzling smile. Veronica, this is Audrey Collins, the marketing director I mentioned, and her friend Tyler. Lovely to meet you both, Veronica purred, her accent vaguely European. Jackson has been telling me about the exciting changes at your company. Has he? Audrey couldn't keep the edge from her voice. All good things, Jackson assured her, his eyes never leaving her face. We won't interrupt your evening any further. Enjoy your date. As they walked away, Tyler whispered, That's your new boss, the Jackson Montgomery. How do you know him well enough for a run-in like that? It's complicated, Audrey muttered, watching as Jackson and Veronica were seated at a private booth across the restaurant. He's been directly involved in the acquisition. The rest of the date was a disaster. Audrey couldn't focus on anything Tyler said, her awareness constantly drawn to Jackson's presence across the room. She caught him looking at her more than once, his expression inscrutable. Veronica, meanwhile, seemed increasingly irritated by her date's distraction. By the time Tyler suggested they call it a night, Audrey was almost pathetically grateful. Outside the brewpub, he hesitated before saying, I had a nice time, but I get the feeling you've got a lot on your mind. I'm sorry, Tyler, you're right. Work is just consuming right now. I understand. He smiled kindly. Maybe we could try again when things settle down? Maybe, Audrey agreed, though they both knew it was unlikely. After an awkward goodbye, Audrey turned to walk toward the nearest rideshare pickup zone. She'd gone barely half a block when she heard her name. Audrey, wait. She froze, recognizing Jackson's voice instantly. Slowly, she turned to face him. Where's your date? Veronica had an early photo shoot tomorrow. He stepped closer, his expression serious. That wasn't a coincidence back there. What do you mean? I knew you'd be here tonight. I came deliberately. Anger flared in Audrey's chest. You followed me on my date? With a decoy girlfriend? What kind of twisted power game is that? It's not a game. Jackson ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of genuine agitation. Veronica is an old friend who owed me a favor. I needed to see you outside the office, away from corporate politics and acquisition talks. Why? Audrey demanded, crossing her arms against the evening chill and against the confusing emotions Jackson stirred in her. Because I can't stop thinking about you, he admitted, his voice dropping lower. About our dinner at Bella Luna. About how you challenge me in ways no one has in years. This is completely inappropriate, Audrey protested, even as her heart raced. You're my boss. Technically, I'm your boss's boss's boss, Jackson replied with a hint of his usual confidence. And in 3 weeks, when the acquisition is complete, I won't be in your direct reporting line at all. That doesn't make this okay. No, it doesn't, he agreed, surprising her, which is why I'm stepping back from the acquisition team, effective immediately. Thomas Hilton will oversee the final integration phases. Audrey stared at him, struggling to process this development. You're removing yourself from a multi-million-dollar acquisition because of me? Because it's the right thing to do. Jackson took another step toward her, close enough now that she could detect the subtle scent of his cologne, the same one she'd noticed in the conference room a week ago. I don't mix business with pleasure, remember? So I'm removing the business element. Before Audrey could respond, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Automatically, she glanced down at the screen and felt the blood drain from her face. Breaking. Montgomery Industries. CEO Jackson Montgomery in secret relationship with junior employee amid company acquisition. Beneath the headline was a grainy photo of them outside Bella Luna the previous Thursday, Jackson handing her his business card, their faces close together. Jackson? She held up the phone, her hand trembling slightly. We have a problem. His expression darkened as he read the headline. Who would... He stopped abruptly, understanding dawning. The hostess at Bella Luna. She must have recognized me and taken the photo. This is a disaster, Audrey whispered. Everyone will think I slept my way into the promotion. We'll issue a statement clarifying what? That I mistook you for my blind date. That we had dinner once before you decided to make me a director. Audrey laughed bitterly. No one will believe it. Then what do you suggest? Jackson's voice was tight with controlled anger. Not at her, she realized, but at the situation. Audrey took a deep breath, forcing herself to think clearly, despite the panic threatening to overwhelm her. The promotion, I can't accept it now. That's ridiculous, you earned that position. It doesn't matter what's true, Jackson. It matters what people believe. Audrey stepped back, creating distance between them. I need to go home. I need to think. Audrey, please, she interrupted. Just give me some space. For a moment, she thought he might argue further. Instead, he nodded once, his expression grave. Call me when you're ready to talk, whatever time, day or night. As her rideshare pulled away from the curb, Audrey watched Jackson standing alone on the sidewalk, looking for the first time since she'd met him like something other than the confident, powerful CEO. Looking, in fact, like a man who had just lost something precious before he'd fully grasped it. By morning, the story had exploded. Audrey's inbox overflowed with messages from colleagues ranging from supportive to accusatory. Jessica fielded 3 calls from local reporters before unplugging their landline. Even Tyler sent a text expressing his surprise and asking if she needed someone to talk to. Audrey called in sick, unable to face the whispers and stares that would surely await her at the office. Around noon, her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. Hello? She answered warily. Audrey Collins? A woman's crisp voice inquired. This is Diana Reynolds, head of PR for Montgomery Industries. Mr. Montgomery suggested I reach out to you directly regarding this morning's situation. I'm not giving a statement, Audrey said immediately. Actually, I'm calling to invite you to a private meeting at our corporate headquarters. 3 o'clock today, a car will pick you up. Why would I agree to that? There was a pause before Diana replied. Because Mr. Montgomery isn't the only one who knows the truth about your dinner at Bella Luna. And because what I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about your promotion. At precisely 2:30 p.m., a sleek black car pulled up outside Audrey's apartment building. The driver, a professionally polite woman in her 50s, offered no conversation beyond confirming Audrey's identity before whisking her through Seattle's rain-slick streets toward Montgomery Industries' gleaming headquarters. Unlike the functional office building where Pinnacle Marketing operated, the Montgomery Tower was a marvel of modern architecture, 60 floors of glass and steel that dominated the skyline. In the lobby, a security guard checked Audrey's ID before directing her to a private elevator that required a key card for access. "Ms. Reynolds is expecting you on the 58th floor," he explained, swiping his own card and stepping back as the elevator doors slid open. The ascent was swift and silent, giving Audrey precious little time to gather her thoughts or calm her nerves. What could Diana Reynolds possibly know that would change everything about her promotion? And would Jackson be at this meeting? The thought of facing him after the media firestorm made her stomach clench with anxiety. The elevator opened directly into a reception area where a poised woman in her early 40s waited, hand extended. "Ms. Collins, I'm Diana Reynolds." Her handshake was firm, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Did I have a choice?" Audrey asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Diana's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "We always have choices, Miss Collins. Please follow me." She led Audrey through a series of corridors to a conference room with a stunning view of the Puget Sound. To Audrey's surprise, Jackson wasn't present. Instead, a silver-haired man in his 60s sat at the head of the table, studying a tablet with intense concentration. He looked up as they entered, his piercing blue eyes immediately reminding Audrey of Jackson. "Ms. Collins," Diana said formally, "may I present William Montgomery, chairman of the board of Montgomery Industries." William Montgomery, Jackson's father, and the founder of the empire his son now ran. Audrey had seen his photo in business magazines and company literature, but nothing had prepared her for the commanding presence of the man in person. "Ms. Collins." William's voice was deeper than his son's, with a gravitas that came from decades of corporate leadership. "Please sit down." Audrey complied, her mind racing. Why would the chairman himself be involved in what amounted to a PR crisis with a mid-level employee? "I assume you're wondering why you're here," William continued, once Diana had taken a seat to his right. "And where my son is." "The thought had crossed my mind," Audrey admitted. "Jackson is currently in damage control meetings with the executive team. He doesn't know you're here." William leaned forward slightly, his gaze assessing. "I wanted to speak with you directly. Without his influence." Audrey straightened in her chair. "If this is about my resignation, I was planning to submit it tomorrow." "That won't be necessary," William replied calmly. "With all due respect, Mr. Montgomery, I don't see an alternative. The media is painting me as someone who slept her way into a promotion." "And is that what happened, Miss Collins?" The bluntness of the question caught Audrey off guard. "No, absolutely not." "I believe you." William's tone was matter-of-fact. "Not least because I was the one who flagged your name for promotion 3 months ago, well before you ever met my son." Audrey stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" William nodded to Diana, who slid a folder across the table. Inside were performance reviews, campaign results, and client feedback, all with Audrey's name highlighted. "Our acquisition team has been analyzing Pinnacle's personnel and performance data since discussions began last quarter," William explained. "Your work consistently stood out. Innovative strategies, exceptional results, strong team leadership, despite your lack of an official management title." Audrey scanned the documents, recognizing projects she'd spearheaded and campaigns she'd developed, all annotated with comments from Montgomery Industries analysts. "I don't understand," she said finally. "If this was decided months ago, why did Jackson offer me the position like it was his idea? Why let me believe it had anything to do with our encounter?" William's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "My son can be protective of his decisions. He likely wanted to assess you himself before finalizing what had already been recommended." "But the timing was coincidental," Diana interjected. "Or perhaps fate, if you believe in such things. The promotion was always coming, Ms. Collins. Your dinner with Jackson neither created nor destroyed that opportunity." Audrey sat back, processing this revelation. "Why are you telling me this now? Why not let me resign and make this whole PR nightmare go away?" William Montgomery's gaze was steady. "Because Montgomery Industries values talent above optics, and because my son has removed himself from the acquisition process over this situation, which tells me more than any tabloid headline could." Before Audrey could respond, the conference room door opened and Jackson himself strode in, his expression shifting from determination to surprise when he saw her. "Audrey? Father? What's going on here?" William rose smoothly. "Ms. Collins and I were just discussing her future with the company." Jackson's eyes narrowed as he took in the open folder on the table. "You showed her the talent assessment files." "She deserved to know the truth about her promotion," William replied evenly. "Especially given the complications that have arisen. A tense silence stretched between father and son, laden with unspoken history and power dynamics Audrey could only guess at. Finally, Jackson turned to her. "I should have told you from the beginning," he admitted. "When I realized who you were in that first meeting, I should have explained that your name was already on the shortlist for directorship." "Why didn't you?" Audrey asked, finding her voice at last. Jackson hesitated, uncharacteristic uncertainty crossing his features. "Because I wanted to evaluate you myself, without bias. And then after our dinner, after I knew what kind of person you were." He trailed off, then finished quietly. "I didn't want you to think what happened between us was anything less than genuine." Diana cleared her throat delicately. "Perhaps Mr. Montgomery and Ms. Collins would appreciate some privacy to discuss these matters." She glanced meaningfully at William, who nodded and rose from his chair. "Ms. Collins," William said, pausing at the door, "whatever you decide, the director position remains yours if you want it, not because of my son, but because you've earned it." When the door closed behind William and Diana, an awkward silence filled the room. Jackson remained standing, his usual confidence seemingly diminished. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "For what specifically?" Audrey asked, crossing her arms. "For not telling me about the pre-existing promotion plan? For showing up at my date last night? Or for putting my reputation at risk with that photo?" "All of it," Jackson admitted, sinking into the chair his father had vacated. "I handled this badly from the start." "Why?" Audrey pressed. "You're a CEO. You make multi-million-dollar decisions daily. Why was this so complicated?" Jackson met her gaze directly. "Because from the moment you sat down at my table and called me out for choosing an expensive restaurant for a Dutch treat date, you were different. You didn't care who I was or what I owned. You saw me as a person, not a position or a bank account." "That doesn't justify manipulating the situation." "No, it doesn't," he agreed. "And I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Audrey. Just your understanding." Audrey studied him, the genuine regret in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. For the first time since they'd met, Jackson Montgomery looked vulnerable. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "That depends on what you want." Jackson leaned forward, his expression earnest. "If you want to take the promotion and never speak to me outside of quarterly corporate meetings, I'll respect that. If you want to transfer to a different department or even a different company within our group, I'll make it happen. And if you want to walk away entirely, I'll ensure you receive an excellent severance package and glowing recommendations. And if I want something else entirely." A flicker of hope crossed Jackson's face. "What would that be?" Audrey took a deep breath, scarcely believing what she was about to propose. "The truth. Complete honesty between us, starting right now." "Done," Jackson replied without hesitation. "No corporate games or power plays." "None." "And time," Audrey added. "I'll take the promotion because I earned it and because I refuse to let tabloid gossip derail my career. But you and I, whatever this is between us, needs to develop slowly, on equal footing." Jackson nodded slowly. "I can respect that. Which means no more crashing my dates or sending fake girlfriends to make me jealous." At this, a hint of Jackson's usual confidence returned in the form of a small smile. "Technically, Veronica was there as a favor to an old friend, not explicitly to make you jealous." "Did it work?" Audrey asked before she could stop herself. Jackson's smile widened. "You tell me." Despite herself, Audrey felt an answering smile tug at her lips. "Maybe a little." "For what it's worth," Jackson said, his tone softening. "Tyler seems like a decent guy." "He is," Audrey agreed, "just not the right guy." The implication hung in the air between them, a possibility neither was quite ready to articulate, but both clearly felt. "So," Jackson said after a moment, "how do we handle the media situation?" Audrey considered the question. "We tell the truth, or at least part of it. Montgomery Industries identified me as a top performer months before the acquisition was announced. Any personal connection developed after professional decisions were already made. Diana will want to issue a formal statement. Let her, but I'd also like to return to work tomorrow with my head held high, showing everyone that I'm not hiding or ashamed." Jackson nodded, respect evident in his expression. "And us? How do we move forward?" Audrey hesitated, then offered a compromise. "One proper date, in public but low-key, after the acquisition is complete, and my position is firmly established. No special treatment, no power dynamics. Just two people getting to know each other," Jackson agreed. "I'd like that." "And this time," Audrey added with a hint of the spark that had caught Jackson's attention that first night, You can actually pay for dinner without an argument." His laughter filled the conference room, genuine and unrestrained in a way Audrey suspected few people ever witnessed from the controlled CEO. 3 months later, Audrey stood at the podium during the official launch of Montgomery Media Group, the new division created from Pinnacle Marketing's integration. As the newly confirmed Director of Integrated Marketing, she had spent weeks rebuilding team confidence, developing innovative strategies, and proving to everyone that her position was earned through talent and dedication. The tabloid story had faded after Montgomery Industries' clear statement about the timeline of her promotion, though occasional whispers still followed her in corporate hallways. She had learned to ignore them, focusing instead on the respect she commanded through results. As she concluded her presentation about the division's first-quarter projections, Audrey caught Jackson's eye in the audience. He sat beside his father, both men nodding approvingly at the impressive numbers she'd shared. Jackson offered a small private smile that made her heart skip, a reaction that had only intensified during their cautious, gradually deepening relationship over the past months. Their first official date had been at a hole-in-the-wall ramen shop where no paparazzi would think to look for a billionaire CEO. Their second had been a hike to a secluded viewpoint overlooking the city. By the 5th date, Audrey had stopped counting, and by the 10th she had stopped pretending she wasn't falling for the man behind the Montgomery name. After the presentation, as executives mingled during the reception, William Montgomery approached her with a glass of champagne. "Impressive work, Miss Collins," he said, handing her the flute. "You've exceeded even our optimistic projections." "Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. That means a lot coming from you." The older man glanced toward his son, who was deep in conversation with board members across the room. "He's different with you, you know, more grounded, more human." Audrey felt warmth spread through her chest. "He makes me better too. More confident, more willing to take risks." William nodded thoughtfully. "The best partnerships are like that, each person elevating the other." He raised his glass in a subtle toast. "To the future, Miss Collins, whatever form it may take." Later that evening, Jackson and Audrey walked along the waterfront, the Seattle skyline glittering against the night sky. They had long since abandoned the pretense of maintaining distance, though they remained discreet about their relationship in professional settings. "My father likes you," Jackson observed, his fingers intertwined with hers. "He doesn't like many people." Audrey smiled. "The Montgomery men are more discerning than most." "True," Jackson agreed, stopping to face her. "Which is why when we find something extraordinary, we recognize its value." The intensity in his gaze made Audrey's breath catch. Over the past months, she had come to know the real Jackson Montgomery, not the powerful CEO or the billionaire, but the man who worked tirelessly to honor his father's legacy while forging his own path, the man who listened attentively to her ideas and challenged her to reach higher, the man whose rare, genuine laugh had become one of her favorite sounds. "I never thought a case of mistaken identity would change my life," she admitted softly. Jackson smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with gentle fingers. "Sometimes the best things happen when we're not following the script." "Speaking of scripts," Audrey said, reaching into her coat pocket, "I have something for you." She handed him a business card, his own, the same one he had given her outside Bella Luna all those months ago. On the back, where he had once written his personal number, she had added a message of her own. Jackson read it, his expression softening before breaking into a warm smile. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "I feel the same way," he whispered, before kissing her beneath the Seattle stars, a kiss that promised that their story, which had begun with such an unlikely mistake, was only just beginning. And back in her apartment, taped to her mirror where she would see it every morning, Audrey had placed a simple note that reminded her daily of how one moment of mistaken identity had transformed her life. "Sometimes the wrong turn leads exactly where you're meant to be."